Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Big Dreams, Great Teams podcast. I'm Paula Maidens, your CEO and team advisor, hiring strategist, and leadership coach. I'm here to help ambitious business owners just like you transform into confident leaders, building high-performing teams and creating sustainable business growth. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain to share with you how I'm using AI tools to save time, to enhance my team's performance, and to really step further into my role as a strategic leader in my business this year, and of course, supporting my clients to do that as well. AI has really become a buzzword lately, and while it's exciting, of course, it can feel really overwhelming or even daunting to dive into. From my perspective, I find it really easy to get overwhelmed even by the volume of options out there, particularly when it comes to AI. And, I went through a process or a period of time last year where I was thinking I should be across them all. So my take on this and my advice to you is that you don't need to master them all. You don't need to master every tool. And in today's episodes, I'm going to talk you through practical ways that I use AI in my hiring process to streamline my operations, both internally and guiding and supporting my clients to use it in their businesses too. And I'll share with you how I've used AI to improve efficiencies across my business and ultimately cut costs. I'm also going to dive into some of the pitfalls or the dangers that I've noticed and that I really want you to be aware of to make sure that you're getting the best out of these tools, but not kind of falling down the incorrect rabbit hole, which is easy to end up into. So, a really juicy episode, and by the end, you'll have ideas, you'll feel confident to experiment with AI if you haven't already, and hopefully you'll have some new energy to really elevate your thinking into strategy and some ways to spend less time in task overwhelm. Also, how to talk to your team about it and how you can help your team to perform and ultimately achieve your business goals for 2025. Okay, so let's dive into the episode. So I'd like to start firstly with the main AI tools that I'm currently using. So at the time of recording this episode, it's January 2025. And I think that timestamp here is pretty important in this episode because, of course, so much is changing and will continue to change. But right now, in this moment, I've played with a lot of programs, but the main ones that I'm using every day, like the ones I have open every day on the tabs on my screen, are ChatGPT and Claude. Now, of course, there are so many AI platforms out there. And there's also additional AI functionality within other software platforms, like my podcasting platform, for example. But as far as the LLMs, the large language models, these two, ChatGPT and Claude, have been complete game changers for me. They really help me to get things moving forward and ultimately to get things done. And for me, one of the biggest reasons that I actually find AI so helpful is because I'm a responder in human design. So my profile is generator, and generators have a responding profile. And what that means is if I'm faced with a choice or a need to initiate, so create something from scratch, start, from new, versus respond to something, I work so much better and so much easier and just get into flow or just go, in my brain when I'm responding to something rather than starting from a blank page. So these AI tools that I use and the way I use them is to help me with that first draft or spark that inspiration and the beginning so that I can build on it. Or, in the case of the output isn't near perfect or even at all perfect, the fact that it's so wrong to me, again, is a starting point that I can really continue on from in flow. So specifically, as I said, I'm using ChatGPT and I'm using this for general questions, for brainstorming, and for general research. So I'm using Claude for more nuanced tasks, particularly writing tasks such as sales copy and email copy, where context and tone are really key. So I find that Claude is really great at that. And I also use Claude a lot for, creating show notes for the podcast and repurposing podcast content, etc., into all sorts of different formats. But here's the thing about AI. And what I want to start with pointing out, it doesn't think critically or independently. It builds on your input. So for example, when I'm using Claude, when I give it the right tone, the right context of what I'm asking it to do, and I give it some examples, the output I get is pretty good. However, because these AI systems, particularly these large language models, build on your input, it will build on your input, whether your input is correct or incorrect. So, if your thought process or your tone or your methodology or whatever you're putting in there isn't right, then it will continue to build on that. So the quality of your input is so important. And I think that's why AI has the opportunity to, frankly, be very addictive. It's such a positive experience. So unless you specifically ask the AI software to critically analyze your thoughts and share with you an opposing view, frankly, it's going to agree with you, which feels great. But that doesn't mean that it's right, and it doesn't mean you're on the right track, which is why when it comes to using these large language models, giving the model context and accurate prompt is so important. So for me, this is using it in a way where I tell the AI tool how I want it to act. So this was a really important thing that I learned late last year, to tell the AI tool if you want it to act like an award-winning marketing strategist or as your best friend or as your coach. You can imagine asking a business question to a marketing strategist who's also the CEO of multiple seven-figure businesses versus your, best friend who's so supportive and so lovely but doesn't really understand business. You're going to get two completely answers, right? So it's the same applies with these large language models that I've been using. So the same thing applies here. And I got this tip from Natalie McNeil's AI Dream Team program that I actually did late last year. So full credit to her for paving the way forward with and sharing her AI wisdom. I feel like that's quite a nice segue into talking about where I found AI falling short. So there is a lot, in my opinion, that I've noticed that AI can't do and where it can lead you astray. Frankly, there is a lot that AI gets wrong. And you'll notice that down the bottom, it always says AI can make mistakes. Like, if you're in ChatGPT, it'll say ChatGPT can make mistakes. Please check the information. And it's right. I've seen a bunch of errors. Some of the areas I've picked up only because it's my area of expertise. And frankly, I was going through a process of testing it for what it knew and testing it for its knowledge and testing it for its output. And frankly, it failed. And some other mistakes I've picked up because I just noticed that some of the number crunching was wrong. So my gut was telling me some of the calculations and the analysis that I was asking, I think it was Claude to do, they seemed like they were out. It's funny, I've got this bit of a love-hate relationship with numbers. I'm a chartered accountant. Many of you probably know that. I worked in investment banking for nearly 7 years. And although on the surface, I don't love numbers and maths, and that time in investment banking was so intense, my gut always seemed to know when something was wrong, when a number was wrong. So, that instinct that just lives inside me kicked in when I was doing my exercise with Claude. And when I went back and said, oh, hey, Claude, can you check those numbers? Can you just review and check that those calculations are right? It recalculated it, actually found its mistake. So that's interesting, right? Like these things can be hugely helpful and it's a robot. But actually, when I was getting it to help me do some maths around forecasting, it didn't actually get the numbers right. So in relation to the mistake that I've seen, in my area of expertise, particularly the hiring piece, what's probably not surprising is the mistake that the tool is making is the mistake that most people make when it comes to hiring and recruitment. And I guess that's because it's scraping the internet, right? Most of the hiring templates on the internet aren't right, and they will lead small business owners astray. So for example, AI, and I've checked this on both Chat and Claude, AI doesn't inherently understand the difference between a job advertisement and a role description. If you ask it to write one or the other without detailed instructions like what you want included, what headings, what you want it to specifically address, it will blend the two. You'll get like half a job advertisement and half a role description. And in case you're sitting there wondering, hang on, what is the difference? Let me elaborate. There is a critical distinction between the two. A role description, which might be called a job description, a position description, role description, that's the internal document that you'll have in your business. And you'll have one for each role you'll have, and you'll have one for each team member. Particularly if you're here in Australia, this is the document that needs to get attached to the contract that you're sending out if you're hiring an employee, for example. So this is your internal document that will outline responsibilities, it'll set expectations, it'll describe who somebody's reporting through to. Ideally, it has KPIs in it and behaviors. Now, the purpose of this as an internal document is to be oh so clear, nice and detailed, and really form an anchor point of reference for both you as the employer and the team member to be able to go, well, this is what's expected of you to be performing in your role. And then you get to come back to that document and that anchor point through your performance conversations. So internal document. Whereas a job advertisement, role advertisement, job advertisement, that's an external document, which is basically a sales page. So it needs to be engaging and persuasive and written in a way to attract people to want to show interest in joining your business. So it needs a strategy behind it, as does the role description, but the strategy needs to be written in a way to not give away anywhere near as much as the detail that an internal document would, and to really sell the benefits of working with you, again, which isn't relevant in an internal role description. And gosh, worse still, if you ask either AI tool that I'm talking about, Claude or Chat, to actually write you a job advertisement, if you're not careful, you will end up with a really dry, uninspiring job ad, which will read like a bullet point role description, and it's certainly not going to help you stand out from the crowd. So if I'm using one of these AI tools to help me draft a job advertisement or draft a role description or something like that, I'll obviously include all the information, but then I have to really specifically guide it. Here's the headings, here's what we're trying to achieve, here's who this job advertisement, is aimed at, et cetera, et cetera. And the way I do that is to upload one of my trusted templates saying, follow this format, this is the information you need. So basically it's like I'm getting it to help me put the words together to make it sound nice, following a trusted expert best practice template, which obviously I have in my kit bag. Another thing that I have found AI does not do well and cannot do well in my area of expertise is providing you with reliable salary information. So I would never use it to try and benchmark somebody's pay or at pay review time. You can use it as a starting point for very general research, but it's not going to give you any current market data. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a little bit of a sense of where it may and may not help you in, the hiring and team piece, and a little bit of information about how I've been using it in my business. And that's what I'm going to go into a little bit more now. So there are two specific ways I've been talking about that I'm using AI in my business. I use it for my expertise to help shortcut the process, to help sort of shortcut the writing side of things. And as I said, if I'm creating a hiring document, a job advertisement, role description, interview questions, any of that, I feed it all the information it needs, including my templates, including giving it a layout. The instructions are so specific so that it starts writing and pulling the words together in a nice fashion for me. So it's like that. It just cuts down that staring at a blank page part, which is really helpful to my style. And of course, by me giving it my framework and putting my template in there, I'm ensuring that its output will meet best practice, which is defined by me in this instance, because I'm the expert. I'll review it, refine it, etc., and provide all the nuances that we can't expect a robot to produce. When it comes to business efficiencies, which is the second way, I'm using it at the moment, we use it a lot. We use it heavily for the podcast in two ways. We use the AI tool that sits within the podcast recording software, and we grab the transcript and use it to sort of repurpose and create show notes and create social media captions and do lots of, again, starting that writing piece for me. Something else which you might find interesting is that I actually used AI to calculate my capacity for 2025 and align my workload and which tasks I was prioritizing with my 25-hour work week. So this was part of my business planning and forecasting process. And that was actually pretty cool. I inputted my various offers, the time commitments, what's included, and obviously all the other tasks that I do in my business, business development, all sorts of things. And AI helped me to map out where my hours were going and what my capacity was, and therefore make really, really clear for me the activities that I needed to prioritize. What was really interesting for me was actually this calculation was pretty quick. Of course, I double checked it to make sure the numbers were right. But what I found it helpful, whenever you're doing any time calculations, is you just get to see in the black and white, this is what you have time for, this is what you don't have time for, this is what you should be prioritizing. These are the tasks that you need to delegate or drop off your list. So that process for me was pretty interesting. And again, good data in gets you good data out. So I guess I was probably feeding it the right information, asking it the right questions, etc. But I found that really helpful. And that was actually a new way I was using AI in the last couple of months. So hopefully you can hear from these examples that what I'm trying to use AI to do is to sort of get me started on things so that I can jump to the thinking as soon as possible and look for opportunities to save time on tactical tasks. And for me, not starting from a blank piece of paper on anything is just a huge leap forward, because it's not that actually what it produces would have taken me a long time. It's like the initiation of getting started is where my time seems to go. So that's what I find AI really helpful for, is to help me with the let's getting this task initiated, let's get this moving forward, and then I can just sort of run from there. So now, of course, all of this is just my opinion, and I thought I would share with you, I guess, a bit of a summary of my top tips to use AI effectively and to make sure that you're being strategic. And this is based on what I know and what's working for me. And look, it might change, and I'm sure there are other people who probably are using AI a lot more than me. So the first one I wanted to share is that I recommend you use it for idea generation and not expertise. So as I've said, in my opinion, AI can give you starting points like brainstorming KPIs or drafting responses, but the final product should always reflect your knowledge, your expertise, or best practice. And a great way to do that is to pair AI with proven templates, and not dodgy templates off the interwebs that have come from someone who doesn't know what they're doing, actually trusted expert templates. So maybe you're writing a role description or a job advertisement, start, with a trusted template, give AI that framework, ask it to input from there, go back and forward if you're looking for brainstorming ideas or tasks or responsibilities that need to be in there. Make sure that the output is complete and relevant to the purpose of your document. The third thing I wanted to say is that it's really important that you understand and know how AI is using your data. So you do have the ability to turn off learning features to avoid the tool from taking what it's learning from you and sharing it with others. This is really important and definitely something that I recommend. And of course, being really cautious about privacy and IP. I am incredibly careful. I don't share anything to do with clients. Anything that's not public does not go on any of the AI tools. For my public-facing content, like the transcript for this podcast, I'm much more relaxed and less worried about that because it's going to be public anyway. But for anything that I'm working on that's private to my business, or of course relating to a client, then everything gets completely anonymized because I just don't trust the tool, even with that setting, telling it to not learn from me. The last thing I want to talk about as far as a tip for you when it comes to using AI is I encourage you to set boundaries and rules with your team and the way they're using AI. If you're not already talking about how AI should and shouldn't be used in your business, then you need to. So for example, you might want to have a role that suggests your team only uses a shared business account. That's a paid business account that has specific privacy settings that you're comfortable with. You might have a process around making sure that questions are asked thoughtfully and context is already given to minimize the chance of somebody like getting a bad output and then spending far too long going back and forward trying to tweak it into something decent. Because let's face it, your team are using AI. So get the conversation happening if it's not already, and put some like frameworks, boundaries, and rules around what information is okay for them to put on it, what's not. So for example, you don't want to find out that a team member is using AI to help them draft customer responses through a customer getting upset by the obvious ChatGPT response that they received to a complaint. So is it okay to get ChatGPT? How much does, to draft a response? How much amendment should be there? What are the words that we do and don't use, et cetera, et cetera. So wrapping up with some do's and don'ts. Don't use AI for salary data or market insights because it's outdated and unreliable. Don't rely on AI-generated job ads if you want to stand out and have a good, enticing, persuasive job ad, which I know you want to, because they usually lack personality and they won't help you attract great people. Do use AI for brainstorming and starting points. For example, ask for 10 potential KPIs that might relate to one of your roles and refine them down to the top 2 to 3 that are relevant to you, and then use that inspiration to come up with your 5. And I really encourage you to experiment with AI, but always review the output critically and even get eyes on it from an expert, which is something that I actually did today. I used AI to help me draft some sales copy for some new offers that are coming out. And then I booked a call with a messaging and copy strategist to review it with me because I thought, this sounds pretty good. I've worked really hard. I feel this is great, but let's get an expert eyes over it. And of course, that's a cost-cutting exercise because I gave her a starting point, I gave her lots of context, and she was able to tweak and refine from there rather than starting from the blank page. Okay, so that is about all. And I want to wrap up by, one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what is my opinion on AI? I think it's a really interesting and exciting time for us and our businesses. And I think that if you aren't using AI, you need to. I think you will lose your competitive edge if you don't work out how to find efficiencies using AI because your competitors are using it. So I think that we all as business owners need to be exploring ways that AI can help us and our teams be more efficient in, of course, a way that feels appropriate and safe to you, your business, your industry, and all the privacy and all the things that we need to keep in mind. I 100% feel that AI is a tool that can save you time, energy, but it's not a replacement for your expertise, my expertise, or being a strategic leader. But, when you use it thoughtfully, it can help you optimize your team's performance and support them and you to free up space to apply that thinking time to what really matters. And I know that everybody wants their team members to have the space to think, to not just do and react and act like a robot. So, use the robot for the robot tasks and think of it from a perspective of, how do I free up someone's time to do the thinking on what the robot has produced? And of course, as always, if you're looking for some support in hiring strategy, you want to look at your team and get some ideas or really work on how do we optimize them to perform in 2025 or elevate you as a leader and your business, I'd love to support you. So reach out and find out a little bit more information about my upcoming group program, or you can book a private session with me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found this episode helpful. And if you have, please share it, subscribe, leave a review. All those things are so hugely helpful. I'll be back here next week.